There's one next to Leslie's spreads. So you can plug in there.
Just plug it in there.
Sorry, Leslie.
Not a problem.
You're all set down there? Good evening and welcome to a special meeting of the Kent School Board on January 18th at 5 o'clock. The purpose is a 2022-23 goals progress review. This meeting is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. The purpose of the meeting, as I've already pointed out, is about the goals progress review. We also have Randy Heath, Associate Superintendent of Schools and Academic Support, Dr. Jewel Harmon, Chief Accountability Officer, and Ms. Simone Hamilton, Director of Equity and Strategic Engagement, will be attending the meeting via Zoom. At this time, I'll call the roll call of the board. Director Bento.
Present.
Director Margell.
Present.
Director Hamada.
Here.
Vice President Farr.
Present.
And I'm obviously here. Okay, at this time, I'm going to turn to Superintendent Bella and look for introductions.
Thank you, President Clark and members of the board. Excited to be here with you today on January 18th for our mid-year progress reporting that my team is excited to share today. Without further ado, I'm just going to invite Dr. Nyland to the podium. Kick us off.
Good evening, President Clark, members of the board, Superintendent Vela. Delighted to be back and share in the good work and the good progress that the district has been making and Executive Cabinet has been working on. You have at your place, you've got two handouts, one a big version of the PowerPoint up here and the other one for note-taking for Goal 1, Goal 2, Goal 3, Goal 4. So we'll be talking about a little bit more about that later this evening in terms of how do we continue to collect evidence of progress as we continue to move through the progress. Tonight, we want to talk just a little bit about where we've been. I want to introduce the idea of Plan, Do, Study, Act. Some of you probably know more about that than I do by using it at work. Give you a progress update. Executive Cabinet's been hard at work, coordinating and trying to line up those arrows across the district, and then share the next steps and how we go about collecting data and evidence. So, actually, we began our work with end of the year evaluation for interim Superintendent Vela in May and June under the direction of President Hamada. And then taking a look at goals, updating those. You talked about successes, opportunities, and where we wanted to go with that. And then moved into October and November, moving on the rubric. And then November and December has been around those key performance indicators. And you asked for baseline, so baseline was information was presented in December. So we've been kind of on a treadmill, running hard to kind of catch up, and that's where we are tonight. So an opportunity for a little bit of a mid-year progress report, although it hasn't been that long since you've heard about some of these goals. So Plan, Do, Study, Act is really, really, really cool. So kind of ancient history, which I'm not quite old enough to remember myself, but Plan, Do, Study, Act came about through a fellow by the name of Schuhart. We know W. Edwards Deming, who was kind of the father of the quality improvement cycle. He was getting nowhere in the United States. He went to Japan in 1946. He didn't get too far in Japan in 1946. He was invited back in 1950. And he went to a motorcycle manufacturer, and he said, I have no idea why I'm here, but if you follow this process, you'll be outperforming U.S. companies within 5 years. They invited him back to talk to 80% of the industrial complex I don't know how big that was in Japan in 1950, probably pretty small, but made the same commitment to them. And within 4 or 5 years, they were doing that, and we saw small Japanese cars that were quality, and we ignored it and figured, how big can they be? Not a big deal, et cetera, et cetera. One story from, so the idea for this is that you plan something, you go take action, you learn by doing something. It never, what is it? No plan survives first impact. So you crash and burn, hopefully not that dramatically, and you pick yourself up and you say, okay, let's study this and find out what we could have done differently, and then do something differently. So I could go on forever. I'll tell one story from Seattle. Seattle was notorious for being the last to hire. You know, they'd be hiring in August or September, and we would have empty classrooms at the beginning of the school year, and set up this process and started to unpack that. And then it was kind of like, oh, we hire 200 teachers a year. Why do we wait until August? Why don't we hire them in the spring? So we did that. My favorite one was in regard to the interest that you've shown in a pipeline. So how do we help classified employees become certified employees? Seattle had a budget of $300,000 to make that happen, and actually we're fairly well recognized statewide for doing that, but we left money on the table every year. That there were not enough people that were signing up for the program, even though we're paying for it. All you have to do is sign up as a parapro, and you can come learn how to get certified as a teacher. So we unpacked that a little bit, and we found out that we had somebody in that office that was working really, really, really hard on her own. And as we talked to principals about it, principals said, really? We have a program like that? Maybe we could reach out and tap those parapros on the shoulder and encourage them to participate. So we did, that helped. And then you would have more people coming to the information sessions, and some people would come year after year after year and never sign up. So it was kind of a, what's going on with that? So then started to find out, well, you know, I still have to get a babysitter. I still have to get to a university. I still have to take care of my family. I still have to. So we brought the program to the Seattle School District campus to make it easier for people to participate. And then my favorite one was that after a number of years, we had people who had completed the program, and so we invited them to come back, and they were able to talk through, this is how I handled the babysitter, and this is how I handled the workload, and I'm here to tell you that I did it, you can do it too, and the kicker was, and my husband still does the laundry. So those are things that you would never think of from the get-go, to just say, we're going to improve the number of hires in the district, and this is how we would do it. You unpack, you learn by doing, and you keep finding better and better ways to get where you're going. So anyway, that's my excitement and enthusiasm about that. And with that, I'll turn it back to Superintendent Vela and then the great reports from Executive Cabinet.
Great, thank you, Dr. Nyland. And I just wanted to kind of reset what our board did our last time together, and that is we discussed what goals might we want to champion as we move forward with this process together as a board superintendent's governance team. And as you can see on the screen, I won't read that to you. You all gave some selections, some backups, and we landed on this in for each one of the goals. What my team looks forward to is identifying some opportunities that you might be able to engage in within those goals that you are championing to get almost like a firsthand look at, so what's some evidence that's in that goal that you're championing that might be happening within the system, the school system. And better yet, how might we bring that back together within this process at the end of the year to share with each other as we come together to do the evaluation. I've also shared with the board that we really try to align ourselves with what's actually happening in our schools. and I talked with you about how the system itself, as it aligns itself with the goals, really looks at this continuous improvement or plan, do, study, act through the evaluation process similarly to what should be happening with the superintendent. And that's the whole purpose for this, doing this in a transparent way so we learn with each other, alongside each other, and with the system, which is set up to support and make sure each and every student is successful. So that's kind of a broad piece on this slide itself. And I wanted just to bring us back to that. You will hear more about opportunities that you can get. I'd love to hear from you too. What might be some of the things either you've already been a part of that you can share. I'll share this very quickly. Director Margell and President Clark, I believe we were at, I'm trying to remember the school, Neely O'Brien. And we were talking about how what that principal with the teacher leaders were doing to meet the needs of those students that needed more support in literacy. I believe she had a data wall, and briefly mentioned to her kind of how we're aligning ourselves in the work we're doing similarly. And I can tell you, our leaders appreciate that. They appreciate that we're engaged in this work collaboratively. And I just look forward to the great things ahead for our kids. And so with that said, we're going to go ahead and move into our presentation. If we get to the next slide. And I'd like to introduce our interim Associate Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Mr. Spencer Pan, who together with Mr. Heath, who is on Zoom today, are going to be walking us through our presentation as it relates to Goal 4. And he'll kind of set the stage where we've been and where we are right now and kind of dig a little deeper. So, Mr. Pan.
Thank you. Good evening, President Clark, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, and Ms. Santello. What I'm going to guide you through is really the frame that you'll see. So you'll see some very common, some slides that you've seen before, and some additional overlay that we've provided on those to help guide the conversation, any questions you may have, as well as provide this progress review update. So this is a familiar slide capturing Goal 1, the interplay between the goal itself and then the measurement of it, right? And so when we provide that progress review, I want you to be centered around the updates to the progress indicator and performance indicator, what we expected and where we're at with them. And so we've added some additional visualization around that. So for Goal 1, one of those areas that we've centered for a progress indicator was around our activities with school improvement plans. Mr. Heath will be able to provide additional detail around that. The other one was how we're measuring our success, right? The performance indicator, which we tied to graduation rate. So you'll have seen this timeline before as well. The thing that we've added as additional overlay are they completed, on track, in progress, and where we are right now. And so we've put this current location, this bullseye essentially, right? You'll see it's right in between January and February. And so our expectation is the things that you've seen up to this point, we can give you an update on, because they are activities that either are completed or we have pivoted because of the reality, and are able to report out on where they are at. And in this case, you'll see that our learning improvement team reviews and approves school improvement plans, and that that set of activities has been completed. Right, so we expected to have these done, and they are complete. On the bottom, so in terms of what activities we attach with our indicator for graduation rate, we've also completed those. The reason we've labeled these as on track is it's really a cyclical process, right? So when you think about the P210 report for graduation, once we finish out one, it kind of starts the next process. What I do want to call your attention to is this is a one-time kind of indicator, right? You get one report around 4-year graduation rate per year. So there's other things that help us report on this, but this is the point in time where we update that piece of data. So if you think about our class of 21 graduation rate, which was about 86%, I think it was 86.2 or 1, I have to double check that. What we reported on the P210 is our 89% graduation rate for the class of 22. So that's one piece of data that we are tying our Goal 1 to. And then Mr. Heath can speak to our school improvement timeline, school improvement plan timeline.
All right, thank you, Spencer and President Clark, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Santello. Thank you. We're not going to go too deep into the school improvement plan part of this tonight because we just so happen to have a presentation coming in the first meeting in February, a work session, in which our executive directors of learning and improvement who help support our school buildings on this will give a more detailed presentation on the whole process, including the mid-year check-ins. And we'll have some principals here as well to kind of share about how it looks like in the schools. And you'll have an opportunity to ask questions and clarify things along the way. I just do want to highlight that we are in January, so these mid-year check-ins are taking place. They're using data that they've started to gather through the different mid-year testing cycles that are going on and through other formative type assessments that are taking place in the school. And they're taking a look at their plans and making adjustments if needed, true to the Plan, Do, Study Act. Sometimes what we plan isn't working exactly like we'd like it to, and there's no need to wait till the next year. There's adjustments that can be made as part of that. And what's nice is this mid-year review also aligns with the conversations that are happening around the evaluation processes of our employees. So our executive directors of learning improvement are having these conversations with principals as part of their evaluation process, because in most cases, the goals that the principals have put forth are connected to their school improvement plans. And the principals in turn are having those same conversations with their teachers as part of the evaluation process with the teachers, and looking at their data and looking at their implementation part of the plans. And so this mid-year is a great time to really look at the plan, look at everybody's goals around the plan, and seeing, are we on track and do we need to make adjustments? And so once again, we're not going to go so deep into today because we've got a whole work session planned just around school improvement plans coming up on February 8th. And as true to what Superintendent Vela was saying, we're, one of the ways that our person that is championing, our board member, Director Benno, who is championing this, is we'd love to get you invited to be a part of, sitting in on maybe some of these meetings that are taking place throughout the rest of the year with the school improvement teams.
Thank you. And just highlighting this one slide as well, you'll see this show up in each of the remaining goals as well, right? So you'll see the goal enrichment champion, and then one opportunity that we might recommend within that as well.
Yeah, and before we get into the questioning portion, we'll do this at each goal, by the way, so have time for you to ask some questions. I thought of others. I think it's Director Mata. We were at East Hill, I believe, one of our schools. Forgive me, it's several of them, where I think you asked a really good question, and it was something to the effect: how do you know which students to be that you're going to be working with in addition, giving additional supports? Might have been Vice President Farah as well. And that's a real good example of the connection, or a connection you could make with what school teams have already done in terms of review of their school data in order to align their supports or interventions to set up their MTSS supports. And so I point that out, and that's been evident in a number of schools that we've been at. And I look forward, as we continue to visit schools, as we walk into classrooms or walk into the small group settings, you'll see a lot of those interventions that are taking place. They're specifically linked to supporting those students that need above core or core more. So just wanted to share that. And I believe we're open for questions, Spencer?
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll open that up.
don't have a question, but I have some suggestions for enrichment opportunities. But I guess I have one question, but I'll get to that later. Because I know for goal one, we have to also talked about student voice. So I would love an enrichment opportunity for not just me, but for the board to see student leadership in action. That was one of the things I wrote down. So I don't know if there's a student leadership meeting, training, ASB training, something like that. I want to see something where students have voice and choice in decisions that they make at their buildings. I also wrote down CTE advisory. I would love to join a CTE advisory committee, and a lot of that is a lot of CTE classes offer dual credit and may offer classes where students may not gain credit in one course, but they're able to gain it through CTE, so that makes students college and career ready. So I would love to be a part of the CTE advisory committee and kind of see how some of that, and connections with college credit too. I know we have some, as I was looking at the website, we have some accreditations with Green River and Highline and Renton Technical, but there's other opportunities to join other consortiums. And the last thing I put on there is performances, student performances, band, orchestra, plays, musicals, things like that. Also enrichment opportunities to see our students, not just in an academic setting, but in performance setting where they work really hard to kind of showcase their talent. So I would love to see that as enrichment opportunities as well. And my question was, so that's my feedback. But my question specifically was about going back to the progress indicator and the performance indicator. I have a wondering because while school improvement plans might be relevant as a progress indicator and graduation rate being a performance indicator, I'm curious how school improvement plans how that's relevant at elementary or middle school setting, because graduation rate is not something we kind of look at them. So what are we using school improvement plans for? What's the performance indicator for elementary and middle schools?
Yeah.
That was a lot, sorry.
No problem, I can field that. So we know that the work to get a child across the stage and graduated does not start in high school and does not, start with the time that they earn credit. Because in order to earn credit, really you need to have the academic skills in order to earn those credits in high school, and that starts much earlier. So we do have on-track dashboards that our elementaries and our middle schools use to make sure that we are identifying kids that are on track in terms of their math, their ELA, attendance, and other things that are indicators of whether they are going to be successful at the high school level. So those are the things that they're looking at the elementary and middle school level.
Wouldn't it make more sense then our performance indicator being percent on track versus if we're looking at all grades versus just graduation rate, which is just for seniors? Or is it and both?
And I can tackle that one a little bit. So if you recall from a prior presentation, we do look at both of those, but for any of these areas, we're really trying to figure out what is that key indicator, right? We do track all these different pieces of data. But the key indicator that we've identified at this point is graduation, right? It's the closest piece. If we're looking at one item of saying, this is indicative of the health of our system in terms of moving students towards graduation. Graduation to us is a culmination of, did we do our job across the years that we've had the student in our system? You're correct in that though there's an importance in the on track to graduation, there's different pieces of data that feed into that indicator, as Mr. Heath indicated, right? We look at attendance, we also look at grades. So, but if we're trying to distill down to one indicator, that's where the graduation rate comes in play.
Okay. Go ahead. Megan?
My questions were actually really similar about, it kind of feels like the graduation rate, I totally agree with you, right? Like, it's kind of the culmination, but it also feels like there's a one and done, like either they did on time or they didn't. And so all of the information that kind of goes up into it and what are we doing? Because if they don't graduate, there's end period, right? And so, but I did have a question about graduation. I think you've answered this before, but I need to be reminded of the answer. Graduation rates. Is this on-time graduation, at all graduation? And what about our students that graduation might be delayed? I'm thinking about our TOP program. And how that's calculated in. Could you tell me about that number a little bit?
Yeah, I could tell you a little. When I cite this 89% or 86%, this is what you'll see if you go to the Washington State report card, right? So it's a 4-year cohort grad rate. You have identified, I think, an important feature, right? We could be looking at 7-year grad rate, which would be the duration of time that we might have a student. So there's different ways we could look at that. Presently, what we are reporting on is the general practice standard that surrounding districts do, so that when we talk about graduation, it's the same graduation rate that you might expect if a different district were reporting out upon that. So that's the reason. But I think these are good conversations, as Mr. Nyland, Dr. Nyland also mentioned previously. As it's an iterative process, right? So if we identify in the future that a more representative performance indicator for the district on this goal is something else, it's not an immovable thing. What we're making sure that we share upon right now is what we've committed to, what we've shared before, but I think these are excellent questions.
And please, I think graduation rates are super important and should never not be looked at as one of the top things that we look at. And I think we'd both agree on this one, right? All of us here. But I think that there's also other data that we just want to make sure that is just always presented, so we can get kind of a more holistic of we don't like surprises. Nobody likes surprises. What's coming up? So, thank you.
Absolutely.
If I may, I think it was the piece on if our data show they're not on pace,
Yep.
then what does the system do?
Exactly.
I think that was back to Director Benno's question is, so what do we do? One of the things I wanted to point out is the whole child. And that really speaks to what you're saying, Dr. Margell, is there are so many more indicators that we take into account to make sure that we are supporting the child in order for that to succeed. Back to and if they're not getting it, so what is the system doing around credit retrieval? What is the system doing around options for students that may have to be delayed, that graduation, end mark, if you will? Or how about the other direction? Those who are increasing it with either running start or other. You and I have had that conversation about advanced tiered or tier 4, what are systems doing? But those are all pieces that schools take into account. That process looks different same concept looks different at elementary, middle, and high, depending on what that options are and where students are. So, but thank you for those. Other questions?
Director Hamada.
Well, first of all, a light bulb has gone on. And again, I want to thank you for going through this process, because in 3 years, I've never understood this the right way. And I thought, why are we taking so much time with this? But building this and doing it right is finally beginning to click with me. How from the ground up, we're building this. And I served on, for several years, the Kent Meridian SIP committee as a community volunteer. And I'd sat there and I thought, why am I here? I don't see the purpose. I mean, it was great. We'd all talk, and I was probably the only community member, but you see how just in that incidence with KM, using that as an example, the SIP, that those goals, or it could be East Hill or Neely or Cedar Valley or whatever, in those SIP plans, that those things are indicated. And so first of all, you're building on your foundation, which is your teachers. I'm seeing all the data that they're getting on their dashboards. And like I think the reason I brought that question up, Superintendent Vela, is because they have so much information. And I think it's wonderful you could do that with one child, but teachers have a whole bunch of kids. And how do they divide all that? But they also have other sources that they can pinpoint it out. So as a teacher, you've got to be a good manager, a very good manager of your students. And the ones that pop out, you've got to get those extra supports in there. And you build upon that with your middle school's SIPs and eventually your high school SIPs. The one question I have on this, which is kind of what I've noticed, and I think, again, I'm using KM as an example because I've done a lot of work there. And their population has a turnover, used to at least, of about 50%. So if you take a kid that's there and they go to Federal Way or California or something for jobs or to live with grandma, like they did in the pandemic, to have to move in somebody because nobody's working, I'm wondering that graduation rate, I guess overall it's an average that comes out, but how could you possibly take a kid that maybe came into their senior year from another country as a refugee or an immigrant, or from another school district that wasn't as, hopefully, as academically strong as we're trying to be? How does that factor into that overall picture? Because your 62.2 or your 92%, 98% is not necessarily total on what you're doing all the time. It has to be nationally, state, all of that linked together to get to when you graduate. If you come from another school, you can be right on track and play into it, because a lot of that plays into your rates. I mean, if you have a population that's more financially stable and stuff, and people stay in one place and they don't change jobs a lot, you're going to have kids that go through the whole system. That would be accurate. But that doesn't happen in the Kent School District. I know that's a pretty philosophical question, but how do we account for all that differentiation and movement? I mean, it's not probably fair to ask that, but it's something I think about all the time.
Yeah. I'll take a quick stab at that. I think for the first piece is just a recognition that these are just data indicators for us on the health of our organization and what our expectations are, right? And when we look at graduation rate, we have an expectation that students, as they move through our system, acquire the skills that they need upon graduation, and we measure those skills in terms of mastery, in terms of all this content. So where they start from, regardless of their entry point, it doesn't change our obligation as a school district and system, right? Regardless of whether they join us in 12th grade or whether they entered our system in preschool, or whether they, had a specific background or not. But I think this does address a bit of what Directors Benno and Margell were getting at, which is, in and of itself, how much can you extrapolate from just graduation rate? Like, we have to know our context as well, our students. And when you hear Superintendent Vela talk about that level of knowledge, right, the knowing the story, knowing the journey of our students, that does become important when we start talking about, what do we hope to see? What are the dreams that we want to see when students leave us? So, do we have an expectation that 100% of students, our grad rate will be 100%? In terms of four-year graduation rate, I don't know that that's reasonable, right? But I do think that we have an expectation that students are learning and growing as they enter our system, and that the bulk of them have the skills mastery upon exiting. And so what does that mean in terms of the challenge for an opportunity for us as educators? I think that's the piece. So I don't know that answers directly the question, but I think between the three of you, you've really established some of the underlying questions that we have to ask ourselves as we look at these data points.
I have to ask a follow-up question, just an opinion, but from all of you educators and expertise, would it be helpful, because so many people are looking at those OSPI scores, and they're brought up over and over again. Is there some way that you could track the movement in your school district of how many are in and out? I mean, that we could play that? I mean,
Yeah.
To me, that would be helpful for a PR standpoint.
It is part of the school improvement planning process. If you take school districts like Renton, Tukwila, Kent, Federal Way, Tacoma, and others, there's a data set that they look at. It's called mobility rate, okay? And that's one you have to really take a look at. And that essentially is, so as we look at our students, how many of our students are continuously enrolled when they enter Kent School District, right? That's a form of data that we should be looking at, and schools do look at. where did they come from? What district did they come from? So there's a lot of pieces of data that they also look at in order to do, as Mr. Pan mentioned, though, we have to do some screening and monitoring early, you saw on the timeline, so we can get our interventions going as soon as possible. And so there might be some students that need additional time, hence the retrieval pieces and other interventions that are done with some students. So those are just a couple things that I wanted to point out.
Is that listed on the OSPI anywhere you can see that
I
statistic?
don't believe OSPI does that.
that's-
We'll double
that's-
check.
that's my
but
question.
Yeah, we'll double check. But again, it's not all the data points that schools and school systems use, yeah.
Well, and also, once a student comes to our schools, they're our student. I don't care if they're there for
Doesn't
5
matter.
minutes or whatever they're gonna be.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I treat my classroom all
right.
the time. Like, it doesn't matter how long you're here, or whether you have attendance issues or whatever, you're gonna be my student, and I'm gonna treat you like my student. And I'm here to help. So like, and mobility is good to know, but ultimately, once they walk through our doors, they're ours.
Yeah.
And we love them.
All right,
I agree on that. I'm not
Director
saying that,
Farah?
yeah.
Well, I mean, I was looking at the time, we have 3 more other goals to cover. And I just wanted to, I just saw it says the participation of SIP. Director Beno works during the day. There are more than 40 schools. So I would keep that, this is the beginning, right? This is just the
Yeah.
floor.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a lot that we can improve upon this process. So I just want us to make sure that we are cognizant of that.
Thank you.
And I'll reserve my time for goal 4 when I'll go first.
President Clark, noted. All right, thank you, Mr. Pan and Mr. Heath. I'd like to now invite on Zoom Ms. Simone Hamilton. And Simone, if you'd like to kick us off with goal 2.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Vela. Good evening, President Clark, members of the board. Hi, Naomi. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys today and to share some really exciting updates and some also stuff that's just been happening, in the peripheral ecosystem as it relates to student work. I think what's really exciting, one thing that I've really enjoyed about working in Kent is to see how much of a priority it is for each team to think about integrating student voice and student leadership into what they're doing, both at the school building and up in central office. And it's been really fun to just encourage the innovation and to encourage people to like build those experiments, take those risks, try something we've never tried before. And I've been really encouraged by some of the stuff that's happened since we last talked. So I can't wait to share that with you. As just a reminder of kind of how we set out for goal 2 was really looking at measuring the sense of belonging and inclusion in KSD. And that a lot of my work kind of focusing on building that student agency and leadership through a variety of avenues, but still also recognizing that one thing that's still been a priority for us is that kids don't experience school in isolation. Their families experience it, the community organizations in their neighborhoods. And so also just wanting to make sure to keep at the center of this well that all of the work that we're doing with students, we're also thinking about what does that look like when, cross-pollinated with some of the engagement work we're starting to do with community, deepen work with community partners, and then also parents at different school buildings and what that looks like. So I'm excited to kind of share some info about that. But go ahead and jump to the next slide, Naomi. Please, awesome. So just to kind of reiterate what those symbols are at the bottom, some activities that we've completed. We've got a lot of activities that are on track and some really great things in progress. So when we last met, we talked about getting those student design teams reestablished at the schools that were last year and kind of branching out into next year. So what's really cool is this week, all of the high schools are kicking off, all of our comprehensive high schools, and we also were able to successfully add Kent Lab, or I like to call K-Lab, to the process. And the cool thing about what's happening at Kent Lab is we're also gonna be partnering with the DARTS team and using kind of a participatory action research model to work with the middle schoolers on what would a model for this type of leadership and design work for students at the middle school level, given that there's different age development and the way they interact with their school environment and also just the nature of their class schedule. So that was something that we had set out to try and do starting, as you can see, in February, but we were able to get a hand on those conversations much earlier and are actually going to be doing them simultaneously as we're working with the high schoolers. So that's really exciting that that's happening. Also, each of the schools are starting the initial conversations on what kind of they want their impact project to be. We saw an undercurrent at the end of last year and even in the beginning of this year, a very promising peer concern for the mental health and well-being of their peers in their school and how they're experiencing that. And so kind of jumping down to the lower half of that timeline, you'll remember me mentioning that in the old blueprint, there was like 30 plus indicators and how we were thinking about sense of belonging and really wanting to get away from that and develop these tools and mechanisms that we're collecting information from students on that is aligned more towards inclusion and belonging. And we know a lot of that is not only how they're experiencing the individual relationships with adults, but how they're experiencing their environment. How are they making sense of all those little stimulus together and painting their experience? And so what we've done at the same time as we've gotten these design teams up and running is we revamped the student equity survey to really focus on how they're experiencing the environment. Are they experiencing love? I know that was a big proponent for you, Director Margello, around like love being so crucial and fundamental to their educational experience. We put questions in there around what that can look like in a school. We wanted to know, obviously, their overall sense of belonging, but we added some really cool qualitative questions around what's a big frustration? If you had a magic wand that you can wave and do this and this with it, what would you do? And we've gotten some incredible responses. So we've done it at 2 high schools so far. 2 other high schools are going to be doing it after the break. And already back when I met with you guys a couple months ago, one of the key points that I was hoping to do better with this year in this new survey strategy was to increase our response rate. Last year, we had surveyed over like 13,000 students and only heard from less than 20% of them. And that was a big thing for me, is we can get this information, but if it's not fully representative or a substantial representative, then we're still missing ideas and things at the margins. And so already with our 2 high schools that I've done, one of them had over a 50% response rate and another one about 45. So already with 2 schools, we've gotten more than 50% of the total responses we got last year when we surveyed 6th grade all the way to senior year. So I'm really proud of the partnership that we've built with our school buildings, how that's worked also with our DARTS team to get a turnaround on that information as well for principals, that we've built incredible dashboards for around the questions and points of conversation in the teachers' PLC work, in the principal's PD, really about, we have these academic focuses, but how are they truly experiencing their environment and making meaning of that? Another great thing that we've been doing along the way, I kind of put some in progress things that were shaded, because as we were developing that survey and looking at other ways to collect data to build out that index that we talked about, we have surfaced some other things in the system, which this is why I love this work, is because when you start asking questions, when you start asking the right questions to the right people, you start to illuminate where there's these gaps or duplicate work. And so we also, like I said just a moment ago, that sense of belonging extrapolates to not just our students, but to our families, our staff and community. And so in this process, we've surfaced a lot of other tools that we use for inquiry, whether it's the kind of overarching staff climate survey, there's a family engagement survey, there's some other needs assessments that gets done with Randy's team. But really it comes down to like, how are all those working together? Are they duplicating things? What's the nature of what they're asking? So we're at a really complex, but kind of complicated, cool nexus of, we have all these things that are surfacing, and how do we not necessarily reinvent the wheel, but refine and possibly then create some new tools to put together. Some other upcoming stuff that we have happening is, again, continuing the surveys, but then following up the surveys with empathy interviews and some more kind of one-off polls, as we're calling them, to kind of negotiate the difference between a survey and also just a quick check-in. Let's take a poll, let's take a temperature check. How are we doing with this thing? So that way, as we're starting to experiment and pilot new interventions or new programmatic strategies or instructional techniques, we can kind of be taking a poll as we go in a temperature check before getting too invested into something that we don't know where we started and where we ended. The only other thing I'll add based off what's on this slide is that there will be some listening sessions that will be happening coming up as it relates to what these student design teams are doing. We've scheduled their meetings out through spring break, and that was really intentional to not extrapolate it out beyond that and to schedule beyond that, just because we wanted to get a sense of where the kids were at after that. But this gives them, each school building, at least 6 different times to meet, over 6 hours of time being facilitated and led in these groups to talk about what these challenges are, how they want to approach them, the other things at play. And what's great is some of these students are talking more about just kind of student-centered things that they can lead. Other ones are really wanting to dig into the conversations around grading policies, tardy policies, these things that they feel create a trickle-down effect. So it's really cool to watch their minds some of them take a different direction, but honor each direction that they want to go. If you go to the next slide real quick too. At the end, last time I saw you guys, we had some end of the year targets we had put up there. And I just want to share out where we're at on some of those, but also some other stuff that's been happening in the ecosystem in KSD that's really exciting. So we had a goal by the end of the year to have 80% of our schools to have design teams. We're at 14% so far. It's a very audacious goal for me and the team to get to 80%, but I'm confident that we're going to get really, really close. And really, the underlying notion of that number and that percentage is that we just want to make sure that we're maximizing the amount of opportunity that we can provide this year at our schools with what the system will facilitate and support, given that we can't control time sometimes in a school district. Even though we might try and bend it here and there, we can't necessarily control it. We're also doing some deep partnership with the darts team, specifically around that middle school modeling. And what's also great is they have students even younger than middle school. So we're also looking at how do we model kind of an intergenerational type of student leadership container of how they work together, where the mentorship comes into play, where the partnership comes into play, where kind of the flexibility and how they're taking on different roles in their school buildings. So that's really exciting. The other thing too is some regional leadership opportunities. So upcoming, there'll be a session that I think it'll be looping back with you, Director Benno, which I'm excited you said about wanting to see student leadership in action, because that's exactly what they're doing at KSD with their Wisdom Council. So they had a meeting last month, and they'll have another one upcoming where these students get together for 2-hour convenings, one Wednesday a month, and they're all student-led and planned. And we have 6 or 7, I think 7 students from Kent that are representatives on that council that then come back and do some work back at the district. And what's great is they're paid roles. And that's a big proponent of what PSESD.
Very nice.
That is good.
Yes.
And what's great is we got approved for some sub-grant funds that I'll be meeting with the PSESD team actually tomorrow morning to talk about how we can take those funds and continue that same type of compensation structure, but with students that are in the district that are not going to the PSCSD Wisdom Council, but are doing similar Wisdom Council stuff at their school building. Because I recognize that for the kids that need that, the students at the margin, the scholars, and the type of diversity we want at the table, no matter what part of the school they're integrated in, the more we're asking for them outside of school or in competition with their academics, we're asking them to kind of give something up for free at the expense of something else that they could be doing to potentially putting resources for themselves or for their families. And to me, it's really important that if we're asking them for things and essentially doing work, that we honor and really properly resource them for that time. So there's some exciting stuff there happening. Another thing that's really cool that's been done is I just want to give a big shout out to the Kent Ridge team for pulling together that MLK rally. That was incredible.
Yes.
And Miss G, I call her Miss G. She wants me to call her Jenny, but I still call her Miss G.
Yes.
We all call her Miss G.
Yes.
Yeah, what she did there with the partnership, of the leadership at KM with Kent Ridge, and then also the Fifth Avenue Theater. And what's so great about that program is Orlando Morales, who is the kind of the liaison from Fifth Avenue Theater and the music director of it. He also is a Kent Ridge alumni. So there's just so many layers to that program that's incredible. So I just want to give a shout out to her, because also that's another thing that's student-led, student-driven, student happening at the school building, but it ends up having district impact. Another really great thing that's happening right now as it relates to student engagement and students making decision and having a say in district level decision making is there's some really cool cross-community collaboration happening right now between the darts team, which is Wade's kind of community, Randy and Spencer's community, and then also my community, and doing this Minecraft education challenge. And so it's really being led by Mel Brenner and Angelica Clark out of the digital learning team, but creating these Minecraft, and forgive me, I'm not that Minecraft savvy, so I'm just taking what I've learned, that you can develop these skins in Minecraft that are basically like blank blueprints of a building or something. And the challenge is for 6th graders to create an inclusive school building. So we're building a skin for our school buildings and then creating a contest and a challenge for the sixth graders to go in and to build the school, to inform what are the services, what are the different architectural things, what are the programs, what does that look like, and giving them a blank landscape. And I just think it's the coolest thing in the frickin' world ever, because we're basically meeting them in the arena that they are, you know, the experts in, that they navigate every day, that they have expertise and skills that maybe wouldn't traditionally come out in an English class or a history class, and we're leveraging it and putting kind of the power in their hands to what does inclusion look like for you guys in this new space, both physically and socially. So that's another thing that's really awesome that I'm excited, and I know there'll be more to share. That team will have to share with you guys about that. And the last little thing I wanted to touch on was that we're doing a lot of great work in teaching and learning as we're looking at curriculum adoption and looking at where the intersection of student voice is on that, and how sometimes it actually isn't at the end of the process. It's even before the curriculum starts to be considered, and really understanding how kids are experiencing the current thing, what's missing for them, and what would they like to know. And so we're going to be doing some work with the dual language team on getting some input and feedback and some kind of like brainstorming around what would a continuation of dual look like. And also a big one is in 8th grade US history, and really thinking about not only, since that content area is changing, a grade in which it's delivered, but also where are there spaces to make up, where is there spaces to add, and kind of what is the instructional techniques that we're going to need to employ to be able to make sure that they're all getting the high quality instruction that they deserve. And I know that we're capable of giving to them. So the last two things, I know I said that was the last thing, but the real last thing is the goal enrichment opportunity up here, which is I'll be meeting with Director Hamada tomorrow to talk about Legislative Day and bringing some students on the 27th in February, and then also continuing conversations with Superintendent Vela about an additional legislative opportunity for some of our Latino students in March, but also having both of you on the Equity Council and attending and being partners and working side by side with our community members and our parents and all of that, because a lot of the work for Equity Council right now is focused on that engagement. What is that sense of belonging? What does that engagement look like with all of our stakeholders? And that's where a lot of some of that parent engagement work is going to take place as we shape what that looks like in Kent going forward. So I know I kind of just waterfalled a bunch of information to you guys, but it's fun when I get a chance to sit down and really pause and look back at all the stuff we're doing instead of just always looking forward. So I appreciate you guys and your attention and listening to me share that out.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. I'll open up for some questions for her.
I'm going to direct it to Director Farrow.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I mean, with the amount of time we have, I just wanted to make sure that, you know, number one, student voice, always to hear them out. And also, I don't know how we can, in terms of budgeting, but we need to have families, parents meet at schools where now they are engaged, not only parent-teacher conferences, but having the families engaged at the school level where now parents feel that they are part of their kids' education, especially immigrant kids that usually don't have that ability to really understand what the education system is in the United States, so that increasing that. The other thing I wanted to also point out is, I remember we visited Meridian Elementary, and we had student leaders who actually took us to a tour. So that is also a pipeline to develop from that elementary to high school. So therefore, we can keep making sure those kids, as they're growing, they're learning how to engage other students. Because one of the questions I asked was, how do you make sure that the students that are not vocal and students that are shy, how do you engage? And they really came up with a very great answer, which was, oh, we just approach every student in the school. Not specific students, because they said we want to make sure those kids also have the chance to respond. So we don't have much time, but I just wanted to bring that up so that I don't have a question, but I just wanted to bring that up. And this is just the beginning, right? We will be improving this all throughout the 4 years.
With your permission, I'd like to go to Goal 3. Board?
Can I just ask one thing? I'm sorry. Just looking at the goal very specifically, it very much brings out parents, students, staff, and community. And while I absolutely love all the focus that we have on student and all of this, it feels like that there was the parent and the community, we're not seeing that. And so maybe if, in future presentations in time, if we could show how that's being evaluated too, and not just what we're doing, but the results of it, I would like to see more on that.
That is definitely something you can ask at a school improvement planning process in February. The schools do that, so. Okay. I'd like to go ahead and just call Dr. Behringer up to kick us off with Goal 3. Doctor.
Good evening, President Clark, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Santello. I'll give you the abbreviated version of Goal 3. It's hard to follow Simone because she is so passionate and just so on it. So I come up here and I'm like, all right, we're going to talk about organizational systems and capital facilities plans and stuff. Not nearly as exciting as all that engagement with students. So appreciate that. But just as a quick reminder, as we kind of move through this fairly quickly, that our progress indicator for our creating effective organizational systems was our capital facilities plan, which that's something that we share with the board each year. And then our performance indicator being that maintaining that optimum program capacity. We talked about removing those portables from the equation. That's a big part of that piece. So similar to the previous two goals, you'll see in this particular slide here that we are on track. Right now, obviously, that bullseye is sitting there between January and February. We've done those pieces associated with the capital facilities plan. Those are completed. I won't read all of them to you for time purposes. The one piece that we are continuing to work on right now, and it's just because we're trying to fit it in with all the rest of our work, is now that we've done the boundary adjustments and we're waiting and we're working with our data services team as we clean up all of the data that is impacted by those boundary changes to make sure that's accurate. We're also walking every single schoolhouse yet again to make sure that we have spaces for every single student, classroom, program in those buildings. And so that's why it says it's on track, because we are continuing to do that. We'll have that complete here in the next few weeks, just to let you know. And then congratulations, Director Margell, being our champion. So we appreciate that. You will have the distinct opportunity to participate in a facility assessment walk, and that's something that I do every Friday in the mornings when I go to schools. I walk through the school with the lens of facility maintenance, capital, working with the principal as well as staff when I walk through the building, looking for things that need to be improved, addressed. We have several other people, Gordon Cook, Kurt Anderson, Steve Fairbanks, Dave Buzzard, who also do facility walks like this as well. And so you'll be able to participate with one of us or multiple times at various buildings in the coming months. And then just real quickly on the goals, again, we've shared those four pieces, the 50% reduction in the portable usage. Again, that comes through the capacity work that we're doing, and as these numbers get cleaned up and we continue to walk the buildings, we'll ensure that those portable usage will be reduced by our students, not necessarily by adults, because we'll be making some swaps in some buildings. We have some creative uses and things in mind for those portables. Our permits, we said 5 permits secured. There's 3 right there. And so, and then the 40 projects we've shared with you guys, and you've actually been able to walk the central storage and the athletic space down at the at Camp Meridian. Obviously, hopefully here in the near future, we'll get you over to the new middle school so you can see the renovation as we're going through that right now. 10 flooring projects which have been going on and currently underway. And then the projects at 70% completion, that's the 2016 bond. All of that information, again, for the board and the community is on the website. It shows which projects are currently being worked on, which ones are completed. And then once that new website comes up, and there's a story behind that we don't have time for today, there will be dates behind every single project that's currently either being worked on or it will be started, and when that'll be completed, so everyone has that information. So there you go, that's goal 3 in 4 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Hey, President Clark, is it possible I can make a motion to extend the meeting for up to 15 minutes so we can finish goal 4?
Yeah, I'd like to call up Mr. Brockwell to guide us on that. We'll do that.
Thank you, Superintendent Villa. The question is whether, in a special meeting, a motion to extend the allotted time is tolerable under the law and under 4230.090. I was just looking at it. You may make a motion even in a special meeting because the requirements really deal with notice and not the time of the meeting. The public has been notified, they've been invited, it's on our website, we follow the protocol, so it's safe to make that motion.
For up to 15 minutes? Not, so we can finish earlier?
Does that require a motion, or can I make a ruling?
You can make a ruling in your discretion.
With that, we'll extend this meeting 15 minutes. Thank you very much, Director
Thank you,
Bennell.
Mr. Brockwell. Thank you.
All right, so Megan, it's your project up there. Do you have a question?
No, I'm really excited to be part of this. I know that there was a little bit of tongue in cheek, but the physical environment of where we have kids for 6+ hours a day is important. Right. And teachers and our administration and such. A couple things on this one. I love that what we've been doing is so transparent. There's been both the conversations all the way through. What I look forward to continuing on is just not dates, but also dollars. Shown this is how much we budgeted, this is how much it costs, and just having that incredibly transparent throughout the entire process for our community to see anytime that they want to just to follow along with our appropriation of the funds, especially in our taxpayers with our bond coming up. And then I look forward to having future conversations about our program equity and where those programs are put throughout our district and the equity of location, because we know that programs are so important to graduation rate, to all of those things that we look at and all of those other goals too. So.
Absolutely, thank you. And just real quickly on the program piece, not only is it important at graduation rate, but it's important that students and families can access programs in their home school or the closest school to their boundary school. So we're not transporting kids all across the district for our special programs. So I appreciate that. That's a great point. And of course, as far as the dollars go for like the 2016 bond, we have those figures. The caveat that we'll give when we get to that point to be able to put all that out there is the fact that when we went out for the bond in 2016, costs for items were a certain cost at that point. You know, when you go through the pandemic and you go through the supply chain issues and you go through everything else, you guys know firsthand every single board meeting when you're getting change orders and adjustments because things cost more, labor costs more, and that makes a huge impact. So I think that'll be important, a picture to be able to be very clear on for our community, so there's no judgment cast on the fact that, you know, we're doing our due diligence to be true stewards of the funds that our voters have voted on. But there is those pieces that it's important to understand that just because we said this project costs $80,000 and now it costs $115,000, it doesn't mean that we didn't cost it out correctly the first time. So.
No.
But important information.
I grocery shop every week for my family, and I can tell you, I think our constituents also understand that there are definitely milk's more expensive.
Yeah.
Eggs, if you can find them, are more expensive.
Right.
Everything is more expensive, and
Yep.
so yes, that's probably understood, but not a bad thing to point out and make sure
Yep.
that's very clear on our website. But I just think dollars are important. It's not just done, but also knowing that it is more expensive, and this is why we continue to ask for bonds and levies, and when we don't have funding from our state legislature at a certain level, we still need to support kids. And so the money tree has not been found, and so we need to find that source of funding somewhere else. And where do those come from? Well, those are, where we go to our taxpayers. And so I think dollars are important.
And the ability to be able to show our taxpayers and our public that we are truly good stewards of the money that they have voted to allow us to access to do these projects and be very transparent. So, yep.
Thank you.
Any more pressing concerns from the board? All right.
No, I just wanted to say, Megan will find that space and money for that pool. So be prepared.
Thank you, Dr. Behringer.
With that,
You're welcome.
go on to goal 4.
Oh, my God.
I'd like to invite to the podium Ms. Irene Aguilar, who is our Assistant Director of Employment Support, who you saw our last time. And unfortunately, Mr. Hunter was not able to be here, but, we have the #1 star from our last session here, so Ms. Aguilar.
Yes, muchas gracias. So good evening, President Clark, Vice President Farah, and Board Directors, and Superintendent Vela. So I'm here today to present on Goal 4. So it's to diversify the workforce development. So the progress indicator was our recruitment and retention plan. And our performance indicator is to maintain HR's practices in support of employees' careers at Kent School District. So just on the timeline, I'm going to move this over here for a little bit. We're making good progress. So if you see where our target point is, our current location, January and February, and we're actually a little bit ahead of the game. For example, pull postings normally happen in February, and we've already started to pull to post our SPED, dual language, and ELL. So at our last meeting, we had some conversation of just how were we going to get ahead of the game this year. So normally we do pull postings right before we start recruiting. So when we go to the universities, we have these pull postings out there so that our candidates can go ahead and submit their applications. That we have those in there so the different teams can start going into those pull postings on our site and start screening some of the applicants. So it's just we get a little bit ahead of the game. We compile all of that information to see who has what endorsements that we're going to be needing. So some of the next ones that are going to be posted are, for example, our principal positions. Normally we start with certificated, but I have already started talking to some of the other departments just to see what their needs are going to be. Who else should I be having conversations with? Signing up for career fairs, so we had mentioned, we've already signed up, I want to say for 7 or 8. We're looking at the out of state. Also career fairs, so a little bit with the career fairs are that after being shut down for 2 years and having just a lot of those career fairs being virtual, now the universities are, opening back up again, offering in person. Some of the things that I have seen so far is that before there were universities that would have education career fairs, but because what they're letting me know is because of cost and not having enough staff, now they're having to compile some of those career fairs where multiple departments are getting together to hold one. So that's a little bit of some new stuff that I am seeing. So a lot of conversations just with the department heads, what are your plans? I don't see anything here yet, and just to be able to post for that. But we do have a plan on the ones that we're going to be attending. Let's see here. Everything else, like I mentioned, we're on track. Our first career fairs happen in February, so we're going to start hitting those starting in February, and those normally go to the end of April. And then in May, that's when we post our positions, something that we were talking about. So even though we start with the certificated staff, I do have in the back of my head all of our classified positions, so the conversations that we've been having on the para positions, transportation, our nurses, just all of those other ones, so that is in the back of my mind. So I've already started reaching out to some of our community-based organizations. We have a lot of community-based organizations that work with our families to see, we have some of them where the parents get training already at some of those, to see if I can come in to maybe a meeting that they might have, to present about Kent School District. So I'm trying to get out there, get Kent out on different minds. And then also we were talking about having a KSD career fair where we have that open after we post our pool position. So a lot of ideas. Also, one of the things that, here, let me go to this one here. I welcome any suggestions. So because the status quo is no longer, and there's new pieces that are incorporated into recruiting. So for example, at our last meeting, Director Beno had made a suggestion of, hey, you know, Renton School District is doing this, that's doing really well. On the 6th of January, I was actually able to go over and meet with that contact that Mr. Beno suggested. And Renton is doing a wonderful job incorporating that pipeline from students to the para educators. We do a really good job here in Kent with the para to the teacher position with some of the programs that we have here, but I believe we are missing that piece from student to para. So just getting ideas, that has started the ball rolling with some of our colleagues in the CTE department as well. So looking forward to where that goes. So if you have any ideas, suggestions, definitely send them our way. We're always looking for those. Something else that I'm going to be participating is, so this Saturday, UW has a Danforth panel. They've invited school districts to come in and talk to their students about what our district has to offer, meet with their students on just what things they might include in their application, on their resume, on their cover letter. So I'm taking that opportunity to get Kent's name out there as well, just to start making those connections with our communities. The MOUs for student teachers, so we have a lot of student teachers that come through Kent. So one of the projects that my team started doing was any of the MOUs that we previously had with any of the universities that had expired, was reaching out to those universities again, saying, hey, you know, we saw that at one point we had an MOU with you, you know, what does your program look like? And then just reestablishing those connections. We also have students that are living here in Kent, but are taking classes through universities that are outside of Washington State. So just connecting with those and offering MOUs as well. So status quo is no longer. We are looking outside. The research that I have been doing, it says, you know, we can no longer post a position and hope for people to show up. You know, we really have to get out there, put our name out there, see what else we can do. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions and any suggestions.
Number one, I'm going to extend the meeting another 5 minutes.
Sorry about that.
And I already told you I'm going first. All right, so
You'll take 8.
just so you,
8 minutes.
so just so you know, I have already met with our presenter and our human resources director on this specific topic. But I'm going to direct a question to Superintendent Vela. So in terms of people that we have hired recently into the school district, I want to know if the 3 biggest categories of why they chose Kent were, A, they came from Kent, had a good experience, and wanted to see if it would work for them. B, their spouse has moved into the region, they've located here, and hence they're qualified, and they applied to be here. Or C, they were student teachers here, got to know staff, felt comfortable, and applied here. Would that be true?
I would say yes, and I would add D to that. And D would be, so yes on these pieces, percentage is obviously different in all those, but one of the things that I'm seeing is that our own staff, whether that be teachers, administrators, paraeducators, working in the admin center, that are our best recruiters. And I think if you ask Ms. Aguilar, that is also one, and that's why I added that D. I've talked to staff who have asked me about that or asked to get connected with someone who, because they've recently moved. The other one, I could probably even add E, and that is those parents. I've had parents of family members who are moving to Kent who maybe knew somebody and said, can you help them with living questions, answers, et cetera. So I would add those two.
All right, so now that gets back to my original focus, okay? We can't control what the universities do in terms of the number of people they certify that are eligible to teach. As a result, when we keep looking at a diverse staff that we're trying to add, we are in competition with every other major urban area. So my argument here is we're not controlling that flow, and we're left with the same handicap and the shortage of applicants everybody else is. So going back to what was just observed here, if there is a shift in the culture and people are rethinking about education as a viable occupation, then we should be targeting our own student population as the 5th largest school district in the state. And we have to find a way to get them involved in looking at education in the Kent School District as a future. Now, the problem, though, of course, is housing. And that's a perpetual stretch in every urban area. So I don't know what the answer is in that, but if I know that that's part of the problem, then we should start to explore that, whatever we can do, because the quality of life in this district is important to the businesses, it's important to us for stability and sustainability. So I think we may need some shifts in terms of what we're actually choosing from some of our targets. And with that, I'll end. Anybody else?
I have a quick question. Have we ever investigated doing joint sessions with our union partners on exploring ideas?
Yeah, so when we were doing some of the open houses, I had invited, for example, the CAP president joined me at some of those recruitment events. Definitely, we can incorporate them into that. If we have the one, I'm thinking around May of planning that other event, definitely including our unions in it. And just to comment on what President Clark also mentioned, I know since I'm going to be hitting the recruitment trail, I was looking at the city of Kent also to see what resources they had around housing, because I want to prepare myself as much. So there are programs that they have listed on the city of Kent as far as loan assistance through some nonprofits if you're a first-time homeowner. So I'm printing out as much information as I can. So any of that or any resources that you might have, yeah, definitely, or even make a connection with City of Kent to see.
I was going to say, I'd be happy to talk to you about first-time homebuyer loans, particularly those ones around targeted for teachers. And there are particular programs, no down, low down, assistance and options for that. And I'd be happy to get you in contact with people.
Thank you, Director Margell. Yeah, anything that you can help support. I just want to be equipped.
And also there was, I think, was the last meeting we had, there was a CBO that came here and said that they would have, families help with down payment. So,
wonderful.
So that we can also, yeah.
Yeah. She left really quickly bore I got to talk to her because I'm really interested in seeing kind of what that program is.
Okay.
May I ask a quick question?
Go.
Sorry.
Go.
That was a no.
add more
thank,
time.
Thank you very much for focusing on the recruitment. I hope that we, in future follow-up on this one, go and talk about the retention and retain, because I didn't get to see that very much talked about in here. And I do have a specific question, and this might be at Dr. Behringer. One of the biggest things that I see that might have an impact and potentially negative impact on our staffing and who we need is our sixth grade. And so changes that we have and moving them up to middle school and what that will do for our teacher population. And so what I'm wondering is, has those changes of staffing and what that's going to look like been communicated to our teacher population yet? And if not, do we know when that will be? And so that can fit into our timeline of making sure that we're going to be hiring appropriately for any adverse impact that may have.
Right, yeah. No, I do have those conversations with my team because that's the operations side of it. Just, they're trying to fill me in any of those pieces as well.
And just to follow up on with working with your partners, I talked to our union partners, and they said they have some suggestions of how you can work on that, and not only inviting the president, but I mean, working with them all the time for their ideas.
I could share that part of our superintendent's superintendent's cabinet, which is our labor partners are invited, where this has been shared by our strategic, not only those pieces, that was actually our first meeting this year, is our, a statement that we had made that everyone got an opportunity to share their ideas on how to do this, and our HR team was actually there, so I wanted to share that.
And just a point for the good of the order, this evaluation and this process, we needed 2 hours today instead of 1.
Correct.
I mean, I feel guilty even talking.
No, that's fine. I think, again, continuous improvement is about, so how will we continue to improve the process? I will add one more thing to the recruitment, retention, and those pieces, is really the work we're doing up here. I would share that this work that is seen publicly and the work that we're focusing on teaching and learning, and how our board is really included in the process for championing goals, does a lot to recruiting staff. So wanted to end with that positive thought. Thank Ms. Aguilar. Thank you, President Clark.
All right, with that, it's 6:21, and I'll call this meeting closed. We are now adjourned for an executive session for approximately 40 minutes.
That's a good way to say it.
It is now 7:04, and with that, we're going to adjourn the executive session.